Arcades in the early 1990s were the coliseums of gaming. Every corner hummed with electric chaos. You had Street Fighter II duels, Mortal Kombat fatalities, and clusters of players cheering as sprites collided on glowing CRTs. Amid this sensory storm, though, stood a monolith, a 6-player cabinet blaring, "Welcome to die," at anyone who dared walk past. And kids crowded around, pockets full of quarters or tokens, mesmerized by the sheer spectacle. 6 heroes, 6 joysticks, and 2 CRT screens stitched together in glorious widescreen chaos. It felt like living Saturday morning cartoons come to life. But here's the kicker: that cartoon we're thinking about didn't even exist yet. Before the famous 1992 Fox X-Men animated series ever aired, Konami based this game off a one-off TV pilot called Pride of the X-Men. That's why Wolverine sounded like an Australian truck driver at the time.
Welcome her. Wait, she's not joining the X-Men, is she? She's just a kid. Wolverine!
And Cyclops did sport a slightly off-model uniform. And Dazzler? Who's Dazzler, you even ask? Looks more like she walked out of a disco rather than the famous Danger Room. And this was actually the moment before mutants conquered pop culture. A time when Marvel was still figuring out how to bring their heroes off the page and into the mainstream. This is the story of the X-Men arcade, the mutant revelation that lit up the arcades. By 1991, Konami had become the undisputed master of arcade crowd pleasers. After hits like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in 1989 and The Simpsons in 1991, their formula was clear. Colorful characters, chaotic co-op action, and simple mechanics that made strangers instant teammates. So when Marvel Entertainment approached them to adapt the X-Men, it was both a risk and a golden opportunity. Now we gotta remember, the X-Men weren't household names just yet. The comics were big, don't get me wrong, but Hollywood hadn't touched them yet. So there were no movies, no long-running cartoon, just a failed pilot, Pride of the X-Men in 1989. And I wouldn't go as far as to call it a failure, but that's what it commercially did, in some ways. But anyway, that pilot was ambitious, but short-lived. It aired once on television, then disappeared into the VHS obscurity. Yet, Konami's art team, searching for visual reference, I don't know why they didn't use the comics, they actually used that single episode as their holy text. Every sprite, every costume, every enemy design, all drawn directly from that look. Now, I remember seeing this Pride of X-Men cartoon, and it was quick. It was like a one-time. If you missed it, if you saw it, you saw it. And consider yourself lucky because it came on probably one time. That's the only time I actually saw the cartoon. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty cool because it was, at the time, I'd say the only commercial X-Men we actually had. If you watch Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, which, don't get me wrong, cheesy by Marvel standards, but I love that series.
Now it's my turn.
But anyway, if you watched that was the only reference you had. You had the origin of Firestar with the X-Men, and you had the X-Men Adventure with when they flesh out some of the later X-Men and they fight Siberia. Anyway, but that was your most cartoon versions of the X-Men you had. But this pilot that came out, Pride of the X-Men, I thought it was cool. Now they did have the basically the characters from the 80s. Okay, when we see, and one thing to note, that when we see Wolverine and as we see Wolverine today with the yellow and black, that's actually a throwback costume from the 70s. So in the 80s, he sported that thing that you see in this arcade game with the brown like piece that goes right here, comes up like the torso. That was kind of an 80s thing with Wolverine. And then eventually he'd go back to the yellow and black that we're used to seeing. But that was actually the classic version of Wolverine back in the day. So, and yeah, I think his original costume might have just been yellow. I can't remember exactly, but I know that the classic costume that we're used to seeing now, like on Fox and moving forward, is actually from the 70s. Now, the world became familiar with the Pride versions of these characters before the Fox cartoon ever existed. And I like that, the Pride versions. This game unknowingly became the first true visual ambassador for the X-Men outside of the comic books, years before they became Saturday morning icons. So let's talk about the development journey. The internal code name was Project XM. The team reused parts from the Turtles in Time engine, but pushed it far beyond what arcades had seen before. And what was their biggest breakthrough? 6-player simultaneous co-op, something almost no other cabinet could imagine at the time. Engineers designed a dual CRT setup with a mirrored projection system to create one ultra-wide display. And you'll notice that if you play the 4-player machine, it's one CRT. If you play the big boy with 6, then you will definitely see that split screen. Now nowadays we can customize that. Some people could run that in arcades with a widescreen monitor they got inside their arcade machine. But back in the day, we still had CRT technology, and I love CRT technology. But we just didn't have a big widescreen like that to put in that machine. So you had to have the, and I thought it was pretty clever how they did that with two smaller monitors and have that projection view in the front. So that was pretty cool. And I remember back in the day also like playing one of these original cabinets, and it's massive. I mean, you just don't play it. You have to see it to believe it. It feels like it just pulls you in. Better than an OLED, in my opinion, the CRTs side by side. Now, you did have that annoying line in the front, but back then that didn't matter. It was basically a time machine to arcade's glory, in my opinion. And the sound design was handled by Konami's proprietary PCM chip, giving the game booming digitized voices and electric sound effects that filled the room.
In the 21st century, evil mutants led by Magneto aim to destroy the world. Humans can do nothing against the power of the evil mutant. The only hope is X-Men.
Go and save the city.
I mean, this machine was loud. The music composed by Jun Funahashi blended crunchy synth rock with heroic fanfares, and the perfect mix of comic book energy and arcade adrenaline. And artists referenced not only pride of the X-Men, but also the late 80s Marvel comic covers, resulting in thick black outlines, neon color palettes, and oversized character portraits. So every frame was designed to pop against flashing arcade lights, and they did one heck of a job. Now, if we go behind the scenes though, time was short. Konami had less than a year to complete development before Marvel's licensing window expired, and the result was a miracle of coordination. A game that looked expensive, played smoothly, and screamed a whole bunch of personality. So let's check out the gameplay and the mechanics. Now, at its core, X-Men is a side-scrolling beat-em-up, but it redefined every trick Konami had learned before with Turtles and Simpsons. And each player picked from 6 heroes. You had Cyclops, Wolverine, Colossus, Storm, Nightcrawler, and Dazzler. And each character had a mutant power attack, a screen-clearing get-off-me move that drained a bit of the health. I had to say they got this idea from Final Fight, and it encouraged tactical use. Burn energy to save yourself or risk it for the team. Either way, you're going to lose some energy and put more money in there. That was the ultimate goal with it, but I feel like they got that from Final Fight. Now, there was a difference though. The Japanese version handled this real cleverly. It actually rewarded players with small health pickups for using powers skillfully, while the American version punished reckless use. So this is one of the times the Japanese version actually was a little easier than the American version. And it's a subtle design tweak, but it completely changes the pacing. So the combat felt pretty weighty in this game. Colossus smashed through Sentinels with thunderous impact, Nightcrawler zipped across the field with teleport dashes, and Storm had a tornado that she threw out that covered some pretty big area on the screen. And the stages varied from Sentinel factories to mutant research labs, the Savage Lands, and finally Asteroid M, Magneto's orbiting fortress. And each level ended with a larger-than-life boss. You had Pyro, Blob, and these are the classic 80s villains from the X-Men series. Wendigo, Juggernaut, Mystique, Emma Frost, or the White Queen, if you will. And finally, the master of magnetism himself, Magneto, whose broken English, "welcome to die," became immortalized by decades of memes. So the gameplay's secret weapon was its social energy. I mean, it could have 6 people crammed around one cabinet, shouting, revving each other on, and cheering at synchronized attacks. It was chaotic harmony, and the machines created friendship and camaraderie in real time. Now, if we want to talk about the characters real quick, I have to say, for me, I know Wolverine's probably the most popular that most people play it as, but I always felt like in this particular game, Storm was probably the best. And generally, I like to say with most like 4-player or 6-player beat 'em ups, usually the one with the most range is usually the best character. I have to reference to me, and this is my personal opinion, Donatello in Turtles being the best, Marge being the best in The Simpsons, and in this game, that would be Storm. I felt like Storm was good. Wolverine got the most props because, like I said, he was pretty simple, pretty popular at the time out of all the X-Men characters. Cyclops was pretty good as well. But Storm had that reach. She had a long reach with her attacks, and she also had a pretty good super as well when she used her X power. So it was pretty cool because it cleared a good portion of the screen, and she moved pretty quick and everything. So I felt like Storm, to me, my personal opinion, was probably my favorite in this game if you based on like tier ratings and stuff. If you want to keep going further, Nightcrawler was okay. Dazzler being the worst, she's probably I don't know. I feel like she was all right. She had good. Her lasers were pretty good, but outside of that, she was kind of mediocre, but I feel like Storm definitely had be in top tier in this game. So let's talk about the world and the story. So the plot was comic book simplicity distilled to arcade perfection. Professor X summons the X-Men to rescue Kitty Pryde and Professor X from Magneto, who has been abducted to Asteroid M. And that's pretty much it. Don't think of it as a big storyline like Days of Future Past, which is a lovely story, by the way. But nah, it's all the excuse you needed to wreck robots for 30 minutes. And the opening attract mode set the stage with bold narration. X-Men, welcome to the world of mutants. And from there, it's non-stop spectacle, explosions, mutant powers, and brief voice-acted cutscenes between stages, which is a nice touch. Now, the storytelling here was environmental, okay? The dialogue was cheesy at times, but the art direction and the pure fun, the music and the sound and the feel of playing on this monster of a machine, I mean, that did all the heavy lifting for your fun experience. I mean, it was just, I can't even put it in words how cool it was to play this machine, because you didn't see it everywhere. Lots of times you get the 4-player one, and while that was a decent experience, don't get me wrong, you could play with the four sticks, and you could pick from all 6 of the X-Men. So you got 6 players on both. But when you have it, and I'll show you real quick, if you had it in one screen, the way it looked, it was cool. It looked great. But if you played the big boy with 2 screens, I mean, it just took the whole experience. It was, because back then we weren't used to, most kids, I mean, if you were one of those rich kids that had a rear projector 50-inch TV, which was uncommon at the time. I only had one buddy that had one. To see something this big in an arcade, you know, on CRT screens, that was a spectacle. So let's take a look at both versions real quick.
X-Men.
Yeah, definitely a major difference. I mean, and this little screen I got shot here doesn't do it any justice. You had to been there and see it to believe it. And interestingly enough, pride of the X-Men influence shows here as well. The presence of Dazzler alone, a relatively minor comic hero by the early 90s, came directly from that pilot. It's a fascinating what-if scenario and alternate X-Men universe preserved in pixels. Because unless you read the comic book, you really wouldn't know who Dazzler was. So players in 1992 didn't even know they were controlling a version of a team that technically, in some worlds, never existed again. And this was a snapshot. The only time Marvel mutants looked, sounded, and acted like this on the screen. So that was kind of a big deal. So, I mean, and while it's really meaningless, it doesn't really hurt anything. If you're an X-Men fan, I mean, it was kind of cool to capture that snapshot in time with that pilot, because that pilot was like that. I mean, you snapped, you missed it. I only saw it the one time, and then now you can watch it on YouTube now. And that one actually had Stan Lee's voice in it as well, narrating the story. And I don't think of the X-Men, the '92 Fox X-Men, I don't think they had Stan Lee narrating in that series. It was kind of just, you know, last time on X-Men, you know, they had that, but in the pilot though, it was actually Stan Lee narrating the adventure. So that was pretty cool. So it was official. It was an official thing, but it was just like a quick window, a quick snapshot. If you missed it, if you blinked, you missed it. But thank God, with the power of the internet, you can see this episode on YouTube. So let's talk about the launch, the ports, and the impact. So when X-Men Arcade released in March of 1992, it exploded across North America and Japanese arcades. Standing nearly 6 feet wide, the cabinet demanded attention. Operators called it money machine. Easy play, cost 50 cents, and players lined up in droves. And magazines like EGM Monthly and GamePro praised its scale, and Marvel themselves used it at conventions to promote the brand. The bright colors, the simple mechanics made for a perfect draw for both kids and casual adult players alike. But here's the tragedy. Despite its massive success, there was no home port. The technology was too complex for Super NES or the Genesis, and the dual screen presentation and 6-player co-op were impossible to reproduce accurately, at least back in the 90s. Now, like I said earlier, nowadays, yeah, we can implement that no problem. But for almost 2 decades, X-Men lived exclusively in memory, the stuff of arcade legends. And it wasn't until 2010 that the game finally received an official port for the PlayStation Network and the Xbox Live Arcade service. And this version, developed by Backbone Entertainment, included online multiplayer and the choice between the US or the Japanese rule sets. So while the game sold well at the beginning, but unfortunately, like other Xbox Live and PlayStation Network arcade games, the license expired quickly, and the game was delisted by 2013. So that gave you a really small window to pick this game up. So collectors that missed that window then turned to emulation and original boards if you can find one, keeping the mutant flame alive through MAME setups and fan restorations. But that wouldn't be the end of the story. Fast forward to 2021, when Arcade 1UP brought the dream full circle. Their X-Men arcade cabinet offered 4-player local co-op, a crisp LCD screen, and online functionality, letting players across the world relive the 6-player chaos from the home. And it wasn't just nostalgia. It was, in my mind, preservation. We gotta preserve these old games. And the cabinet also included Captain America and the Avengers in the Galactic Storm. And this was huge. turned it into a mini Marvel arcade museum. So you actually got 3 cool kick-ass games. And a buddy of mine had the X-Men one, and it was just a cool experience. I mean, granted, it's a lot smaller. It's not like, 8 feet wide like the arcade was, but even for what it was pretty cool. I mean, you had 3 games. You had Captain America, you had X-Men, you had the Avengers. So, I mean, it was a nice little throwback for that machine. And you had the 4 sticks you could play on. And obviously, like I said, it was smaller, but it still gave you a kick-ass experience. And as far as legacy and influence, X-Men Arcade remains one of the most beloved beat-em-ups of all time. And not so much because of the depth, because let's be real, it's a beat-em-up, but because of the energy it brought. It's pure joy captured in silicon. I mean, it proved that licensed games, and they really didn't need proof. At this time, Konami was already riding on a high of Turtles, Simpsons, and other games. And so it reinforced licensed games are still legitimate experiences rather than cheap tie-ins. And let's also talk about the success that it inspired. You had Capcom's version, X-Men Children of the Atom in 1994, which these led more to the, the characters we know and love from the Fox cartoon. And then that led directly to Marvel vs. Capcom. So it started a trend, even though it was Konami doing their thing off the old series, it actually showed that the X-Men could be successful on the big arcade screens. And that's kind of where we got the, the Marvel or the Capcom games, Marvel with that when they got the license with it. But that's a video for another time, because that's some excellent games that Capcom and Marvel, when they coincided and made, it was definitely a good time. But more on that in another video. Let's continue with this one. Now, one thing I did feel like it inspired though was you could trace, I felt like you could trace his fingerprints even in the newer games like X-Men Legends in 2004 and Ultimate Alliance games. And to me, it carried the DNA of the co-op mutant mayhem, and it lived in every team-based superhero game since. So it was actually a big deal to have co-op when you got, because nobody wants to be just one hero. I mean, you had games that were successful like that. If you look at the old Genesis X-Men games that were excellent games, but in arcade settings type games, you want co-op play. And it did have co-op back in the day as well. So don't sleep on the Sega Genesis. So beyond influence, the game helped cement X-Men as pop icons. When the Fox cartoon debuted later that same year, millions of kids had already recognized the characters thanks to Konami's arcade. So it wasn't just the game, it was kind of a spark that ignited the X-Men's multimedia universe. So looking back, X-Men Arcade is more than an arcade relic. It's a living snapshot of a universe just finding its footing. Born from a forgotten pilot, it predicted a future where mutants would dominate comics, TV, film, and gaming eventually. It captured the thrill of teamwork, the chaos of friendship, and the pure joy of shared victory, all in one glowing dual CRT cabinet. So in the end, this game wasn't just about mutants saving the world. It was about proving that when players work together, 6 heroes, 6 strangers, just 6 people in general, and you gotta have 6 joysticks, one mission, anything is possible. So what I think about X-Men Arcade? This thing was a spectacle. I've only seen a handful of these. I mean, I'd see the 4-player one, like most arcades would have the 4-player X-Men, no problem. But the big boy, the 6-player one, that one was only the biggest arcades had it. And it was cool because the machine was so big that I remember, and sometimes you see this in arcades, if you back in the day, if you frequented an arcade a lot, you knew the setup of where everything was. So when you got a new game, especially one this big, they'd have to make room and rearrange our machine. Now, sometimes they rearrange the most popular machines up in the front. That's where your big money makers are. And the ones that are kind of like novelty, like Pac-Man and stuff, they usually be in the back. But the big ones, like X-Men, you'd have to like make room and clear it out, and had to have its own dedicated space. Those machines were so big back in the day. Now, one thing I will say, when I bought this machine here, this Chulix machine, which is probably one of my all-time favorites. That is my favorite arcade machine that I own. I bought it from a guy in Hoffman Estates, and when I went to his house to pick it up, I took my son with me, went to go pick the machine up. He had a downstairs living room, like a little foyer area. You go down these stairs, and it was like a basement. And this dude had it's probably the best man cave I've ever seen in my life. He had carpeted floor. He had the actually arcade, that commercial arcade floor, looks like the kind you see in the movie theaters. He had that all through the floor. He had lighting and everything. And this dude had about, I'd say realistically, no BS, probably about 15 games. But the games he had candy cap machines, not a Nova Blast. I love my Nova Blast, but it's not a candy cap. He had legit candy caps. He had a big blue Capcom Street Fighter 2 machine, but it was Street Fighter, I want to say Super Street Fighter 2 was in there, but he had a big blue. He had a DDR, legit, not some bogus made up one, a legit DDR machine with the, the hard commercial grade dance mat and everything, playing actual DDR music. he had the music machine. I don't know how deep you guys are on arcade machines, but the newer ones are those music machines, and they're super fun. If you never played one, play it. But it's basically got these 2 dials on it. He had one of those. He had a couple of classic arcade machines, and the holy grail he had was an actual 6-player X-Men arcade machine, not the arcade 1-up, but the actual machine. And that thing was in pristine condition. I bought this from him. He let this one go for a nice price. Super nice guy. And I ended up picking that machine up. I ended up playing. I said, dude, I gotta play this thing one time. And he was cool. He put some tokens in for me. Because he actually had a token machine too. Don't even forget, he had an actual token machine. He didn't charge more. He just gave me some straight tokens. But anyway, I played it a few times, and just to play it, because I haven't played that game in years, the actual real machine. And it was like, even today, I mean, I had this machine about almost 2 or 3 years now, but that was just to go back in time and play on a real machine uninterrupted. Now I missed the cheers and everything, but people were in the arcade. But this guy, I remember asking him before I left with the machine, I said, dude, how do you afford all this? How do you keep all this machine running? Because it was just a regular, if you see the house outside, it was in a nice house, but downstairs was where the magic was. And I asked him, I said, dude, how do you afford all these? And his response was, I'll never forget it, when you're divorced, you can buy things like this. I mean, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I like being married, but yeah, but I guess that's one upside. You know, if God forbid you ever split up, you have the potential to have your own arcade like that. So I guess there's a silver lining in everything. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that. But anyway, that's my experience with X-Men, guys. It was just a real fun game. I still feel like Storm's the best in that game, my personal opinion. But if you ever can catch this one in the wild, if you ever get to see an X-Men machine, even a 4-player one, but if you are lucky enough to find one of the big boys still around in the wild somewhere, I want to say Galloping Ghost Arcade has it. I forget there sometimes. It's close to me. It's about an hour away from where I live at, Galloping Ghost in Chicagoland area. Go there. I believe they have a 6-player there as well. But if you ever get a chance to play this one, do yourself a favor. I don't care how much money it takes you to beat it. Beat that game to the end and experience those big speakers and those dual CRT screens. But that's gonna do it for X-Men, guys. Let me know in the comments your experience with it. Did you buy the arcade 1-up version of it? And if you did, it's actually a pretty good buy, because you can find those things a little cheaper now on the internet. You can find them for not a whole lot of money, and you actually get a pretty good experience from it. So, but as always, guys, take care of yourself, protect your inner peace. God bless you, and catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching.